As the Texans look for an offensive coordinator, there's kind of some tales emerging about CJ Stroud and Bobby Slowik and their dynamic, what it was, what it wasn't, what the relationship was between Stroud and Slowik early on in the draft process. And I kind of just want to touch on it. And I think there's always like an interesting dynamic now on social media. I won't even say in media, to where people say either just dig in regardless of who they talk to or whatever, and they say that's not true, I don't believe that. And sometimes that's the case, and everyone has a right to their opinion, but sometimes it's just a matter of, what does it even matter if it is true? Let's try to get to the bottom of that. But I do think draft reports are the dynamic of draft reports is always really interesting, because anyone who covers the draft, and Lance Zierlein's the one who said this on ESPN 97.5. He follows the draft as close as anyone. He talks to as many people as anyone. But I think even he would admit and tell you that the interesting dynamic of draft reports is a lot of times teams flat out lie. And a lot of times stuff gets lost in translation. And a lot of times it just kind of leaves these guys in awkward spots when this happens. There's also another dynamic of post-exit reports. And there's a lot of time where someone leaves and then all of a sudden stories come out, and the media skeptic will say, why were you saying this whenever they were actually there? Well, maybe they weren't talking as much. Maybe there were some other factors that factored into it, to the information not coming out. But sometimes that kind of happens as well. So whether it's true or not, that always seems to be one of the arguments. I think the dynamic between draft reports and post-exit reports, there's kind of a gray area. There's a little bit of a slippery slope. So let's get to the actual report, though. Or conversation that Lance was having. He didn't report this. This is just kind of a conversation that he was having on his radio show. And a guy named Robert Land actually grabbed it. I saw it on Houston Stressen's timeline, who aggregates all the Texan stuff. But let's just hear what Lance said, and then let's kind of react to it and try to get to the bottom line. This is Lance Zierlein. Shout out to Lance with John Granado, talking about the dynamic between Bobby Slowik and CJ Stroud.
I'll tell you the whole thing now that Slowik's gone. CJ Stroud came to visit the Texans, and Bobby Slowik was telling them, okay, they were watching stuff on tape. Now, before I tell you this, when CJ was at Ohio State, he really didn't talk to the OC at all. He didn't think he knew ball. This coming from somebody who knows CJ intimately. He didn't think the offense coordinator was very smart. So he would only talk to Ryan Day. Ryan Day was the guy who had to communicate with CJ, which I didn't love that, honestly, before the draft process. And it played into some of my thoughts on CJ in terms of coachability. What I heard was that he didn't like, his communication was Ryan Day and not the offense coordinator. Okay, well, that's a little strange, but whatever. He comes into Houston. Bobby Slowik is trying to tell him some stuff, and CJ just says, oh yeah, I know that we call this, whatever, XY switch, whatever it be at Ohio State. And apparently maybe it happened a couple times, and Bobby Slowik just kind of jumped him and said, I don't give a what you call Ohio State, that's college, this is pro football. And Bobby kind of got in his face about it, and CJ's not one to back down at all. And CJ, and I don't know if Bobby was testing him, or I don't know what the deal was, but CJ jumped up and got back in his face. And it was very contentious. It had to be kind of broken up. And so when CJ went to his next draft meeting, and I talked to the team where CJ went, because I asked this team, hey, did you hear anything about this with CJ Stroud? And they said, oh, we asked CJ how his last visit went, which was Houston. And he said, terrible. I don't think I'll be going there. And people who train, like CJ's whole crew, did not want him to go to Houston. And they didn't think he was going to Houston, because it was he and Bobby got into it. And then CJ was drafted by Houston, which that's one of the reasons I was really surprised. Like, I kind of wrote, after finding that out, I wrote CJ off from the Texans, and I thought, okay, this is Will Anderson for sure. And so when they traded for him, I was very surprised, because I knew there was that lingering stuff there. But then in discussing all of it last year, I heard it was squashed. Like, there was no issue. Bobby and him were good.
All right. And that's an interesting report. Shout out to Lance Zierlein for doing what he does. And I know this is one of his favorite times of the year. Again, the dynamic of draft reports, a lot of stuff gets lost in translation. A lot of times those meetings are intense. And they're intense. And when you get the account of the meeting, it's right after. So that can happen. And then post-exit reports, that's kind of where information comes out. Like, he's not going to just stick his chest out and say that in that information. So I think the media skeptic part, I kind of stiff arm to the side. I'm just going to base this on like my personal experience The Ohio State element, I kind of think was a little bit misrepresented by the way in which Lance kind of presented it. Because if you're listening to that and he says he chose to go through Ryan Day, it's almost presented as if the offensive coordinator at Ohio State was told by CJ Stroud, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm going to go through Ryan Day. The offensive coordinator at Ohio State when CJ was there was a guy named Kevin Wilson. And Kevin Wilson was the tight end coach. He didn't call plays at all. So he was basically a quality control guy. Ryan Day was a quarterback coach and the play caller. So if there was a communication and a direct interaction between CJ Stroud and Ryan Day, then I think it has as much to do with the actual dynamic of how they did things at Ohio State as compared to like CJ Stroud just saying, this guy doesn't know ball, so I'm not going to talk to him. The guy at Ohio State that asked me about this said, 0 chance CJ said, I'm only talking to Ryan, 0. Said he couldn't speak to the Houston stuff, but there's 0 chance. And I thought this was interesting after the Georgia game where CJ Stroud kind of grabbed the mic from Ryan Day. I mean, he mentions their offensive coordinator as well.
I'll be his guy. It's a great game plan. I mean, without the right plays, you can't make plays. So, I mean, we all have jobs, and Coach Day did a hell of a job. Coach Wilson did a hell of a job.
So he mentions Coach Wilson there, but the way that was presented was there's an offensive coordinator. You naturally think he calls plays, and CJ directly communicated with Ryan Day. I find that very hard to believe, and I think it's kind of misrepresented as to what the actual dynamic is. Like Ryan Day's the quarterback coach. Ryan Day calls plays. Wilson was just kind of a tight end coach. He's not even there anymore. And then they gave that title to Hartline, and then Chip Kelly actually called plays this year. So the dynamic at Ohio State was Ryan Day is with CJ Stroud throughout practice. He's the quarterback coach. He also calls plays, and he's the offensive coordinator. And another guy is working with tight ends during practice, and he has the OC title, but he never calls a play. So the Ohio State element to me, just me personally, doesn't make a lot of sense. The Slowik Stroud element, I really don't know. I've seen both of these guys talk. I would be shocked if Bobby Slowik got in someone's face and cussed at him. Maybe he said something like, that's not how we do it there. This is how we do it in the NFL. But I would find it really interesting if Bobby Slowik cussed someone out and got in their face. And that's just from listening and being at every press conference he's been at, talking to him a little bit on the side, knowing people that know Bobby Slowik, his personality, CJ's personality, what they've said about each other. Maybe there was like an awkward exchange. I would be shocked. I would actually give Bobby Slowik some credit if he did that. I just didn't think Bobby was built like that to get in someone's face and cuss at him. That would surprise me a little bit, but maybe that's one of those things that kind of gets lost in translation when it comes to draft talk and all that type of stuff. But I would personally be absolutely shocked if that happened. The other part of this is the Texans Stroud dynamic pre-draft. And I think this is important. I don't think the Texans had the benefit of the doubt from CJ Stroud's crew. And I know that Lance said no one in his crew wanted him to go to Houston. I talked to someone in his crew, directly in his crew, that wanted him to come to Houston, but didn't think that he was going to come to Houston. Very close to him. That leading up to the draft and the days up, he wanted him to, but he didn't think he was going to be there. So maybe that adds something to the fact that there was some sort of disagreement. But the guy that I talked to that was very close to him said, yes, we want to be in Houston. We just don't know if that's going to happen. And you also have to factor in that a lot of the guys that represented CJ Stroud from a business perspective, they had just gotten done with the Deshaun Watson thing. So it was already kind of an awkward dynamic to begin with, where you have the same agent, you have the same business guy who had just dealt with the Deshaun Watson thing. And just from a business perspective, they wanted out of Houston from the very beginning. It's the same owner, it's the same general manager, new head coach, which adds a different dynamic. But it was already kind of an awkward dynamic with all of that. So the Ohio State thing, I think it was kind of a little bit misleading based on the actual dynamic. And it would be hard for me to imagine CJ doing that. The draft stuff, who knows? Lance talks to more people at the draft. than I do. My personal experience with Bobby Slowik, I would be shocked if Bobby Slowik cussed someone out. But let's just, for the sake of this, because I don't like the natural, oh, this isn't true, oh, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle. But let's pretend that every word that Lance Zierlein said is true. And it's possible. Again, very well connected, knows a lot of guys. Let's just pretend that regardless of my experience, Lance is the one who told the story. Lance is the one who's been covering the NFL for a long time. Lance is the one that is connected in the draft. Let's pretend that this story is true. Who does it make look bad? Like, who does this make look bad? If Bobby Slowik kind of firmly told CJ Stroud, hey, that's how you did it at Ohio State, but this is the way we do it in the NFL. And then their relationship seemed to kind of blow over. They were cool after that. And CJ Stroud was basically telling the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, regardless of whether he called plays or not, you don't know ball. I'm not talking to you. Who does that make look bad? I would say it makes Bobby Slowik look good, and it makes CJ Stroud look bad. I know we're used to saying, damn it, Bobby, but that would actually make Bobby Slowik look better to me, and it would make CJ Stroud look bad. Again, I think it's somewhere in between. I think it's an interesting dynamic, but who does it really make look bad if it's true? And the other thing is, what does it matter if it's true? Bobby Slowik's gone. CJ Stroud's still here. CJ is going into that third year looking for the extension. Texans are looking for a new offensive coordinator. So who the hell knows? Let me know what you think. Subscribe, like, ride along. Always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. SNL Live, 4 o'clock. Cody Stutes is at the Senior Bowl. We got you covered. Subscribe on all podcast platforms as well as on the YouTube channel. Appreciate y'all for coming through.